Marcus Rivera had been cleaning the Blackstone Tower for 3 years, but tonight felt different. The 40-year-old janitor pushed his cart through the marble hallways of the 60th floor, where only the most powerful executives worked. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle as he moved methodically from office to office. The building was supposed to be empty after midnight, but Marcus noticed something odd. A thin line of light glowed from under the door of the corner office belonging to Richard Blackstone, the billionaire CEO whose face appeared on magazine covers worldwide. Marcus had never seen anyone work this late, not even during the company's busiest periods. His curiosity got the better of him. Marcus approached the heavy oak door and pressed his ear against it. Muffled voices filtered through, but he couldn't make out the words. He knew he shouldn't be listening, but something about the tone made his heart race. The voices sounded urgent, almost desperate. Marcus remembered his late wife Elena's words about trusting his instincts. She had always said he was too observant for his own good. As a former police officer in El Salvador before immigrating to America, Marcus had learned to notice details others missed. Tonight, those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. The voices stopped suddenly. Marcus quickly moved away from the door and began mopping the hallway, his heart pounding. Footsteps approached from inside the office. The door opened and Marcus kept his head down, focusing on his work. "Make sure it's handled quietly," came Blackstone's distinctive voice. "No loose ends." Another man responded in a thick accent Marcus couldn't identify. "The family won't be a problem anymore after tonight." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He had heard enough crime shows to know what no loose ends meant. Without looking up, he continued mopping as the two men walked past him toward the elevators. To them, he was invisible, just another immigrant doing the jobs nobody else wanted. After the elevator doors closed, Marcus stood alone in the hallway. His hands trembled as he gripped the mop. Should he call the police? But what would he tell them? He had no proof, just overheard fragments of a conversation. Who would believe a janitor over a billionaire? The rest of his shift passed in a blur. Marcus couldn't concentrate on his cleaning duties. Every shadow seemed threatening, every sound made him jump. When dawn finally broke over the city skyline, he gathered his supplies and headed home to his small apartment in Queens. On the subway ride home, Marcus pulled out his old smartphone and searched for recent news about Blackstone Industries. Nothing unusual appeared in the headlines. Richard Blackstone was scheduled to appear at a charity gala next week, and the company had just announced record profits. Everything looked normal from the outside, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had witnessed something terrible being planned. The way Blackstone had spoken, the urgency in the other man's voice, it all pointed to something dark happening behind the gleaming facade of corporate success. At home, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and stared at Elena's photograph. She had been the brave one in their marriage, the one who stood up for what was right even when it was dangerous. Before her death from cancer 2 years ago, she had made him promise to always help others when he could. "What should I do, mi amor?" he whispered to the photograph. The answer came to him as he remembered something else from that night. When the men had walked past him, Marcus had noticed something unusual. The stranger with Blackstone had been carrying a leather folder with what looked like family photographs spilling out. One photo had fallen to the floor near Marcus's feet. Marcus realized he had instinctively picked up the photograph and stuffed it in his pocket without thinking. With shaking hands, he retrieved it now. The image showed a family, a man, woman, and 2 young children standing in front of a house. They looked happy, ordinary, completely unaware that their picture was being carried around by someone discussing handling a family problem. On the back of the photograph, someone had written an address in neat handwriting. 2847 Maple Street, Riverside, CA. Below that was a date, tomorrow's date. Marcus's military training from his youth kicked in. This wasn't just about overhearing a conversation anymore. He was holding evidence that a specific family was in immediate danger. The date on the back of the photo meant whatever Blackstone and his associate had planned was going to happen very soon. He thought about his own family back in El Salvador, how helpless he had felt when violence touched their lives. He thought about Elena and her unwavering belief in doing the right thing. Most importantly, he thought about the innocent faces in the photograph, two children who had no idea their lives might be in danger. Marcus made his decision. He couldn't go to the police without more evidence, but he also couldn't just sit back and let something terrible happen to this family. He needed to find out more about what Blackstone was planning and why this particular family was being targeted. Problem was that Marcus had never been involved in anything like this before. He was a simple man who cleaned offices and went home to his quiet apartment. But sometimes, he realized, ordinary people were thrust into extraordinary situations. Sometimes the person in the best position to help wasn't a detective or a superhero. It was just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Marcus looked at the photograph again. The family looked so normal, so much like the families he saw in his neighborhood every day. Parents working hard to provide for their children, kids playing in their yard without a care in the world. These were people just like him, people who deserved to be safe. He made a phone call to his supervisor claiming he was sick and couldn't work his next shift. Then Marcus began planning something he never thought he would do: investigate a billionaire and try to uncover a conspiracy that could reach the highest levels of power in the city. As he prepared for what might be the most dangerous thing he had ever attempted, Marcus whispered another prayer to Elena's memory. He was about to discover that some secrets were worth risking everything to expose, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes were the ones who changed everything. Marcus spent the morning researching everything he could find about the address on the photograph. The house at 2847 Maple Street belonged to the Henderson family: David Henderson, his wife Sarah, and their twin daughters Emma and Sophie, both 8 years old. David worked as an accountant for a small firm in Riverside, while Sarah taught elementary school. On the surface, the Hendersons seemed like the most ordinary family imaginable. Marcus couldn't understand why a billionaire like Richard Blackstone would want to hurt them. There had to be a connection he was missing. Using his old laptop, Marcus dug deeper into public records. He discovered that David Henderson had previously worked for a company called Pacific Financial Group. Marcus's heart skipped a beat when he found out that Blackstone Industries had acquired Pacific Financial 3 years ago in a hostile takeover. Janitor. Puzzle pieces began falling into place. David Henderson might have access to information that could damage Blackstone's reputation or business empire. But what could a simple accountant know that would be worth threatening a family over? Marcus decided he had to warn the Henderson family, but he also knew they would never believe a stranger claiming their lives were in danger. He needed proof, and the only way to get it was to return to Blackstone Tower and find more evidence. That evening, Marcus reported to work as usual, but his mission had completely changed. Instead of just cleaning offices, he was now conducting a dangerous investigation. He had watched enough detective shows with Elena to know he needed to be careful and methodical. Marcus started with Blackstone's office. Using his master key, he entered the lavish space filled with expensive artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The office was immaculate, but Marcus had learned to look beyond the obvious. Behind Blackstone's massive desk, Marcus found a wall safe that was slightly ajar. His hands trembled as he carefully opened it wider. Inside, he discovered manila folders filled with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance reports on various people. One folder was labeled Henderson Problem Final Resolution. Marcus's stomach churned as he photographed the contents with his phone. The folder contained detailed information about the Henderson family's daily routines, the children's school schedule, and even photos taken from a distance showing the family at a park. The most chilling document was a contract with a company called Discrete Solutions LLC for permanent relocation services. The contract was dated for the next day and included a payment of $5 million. Marcus didn't need to be a detective to understand what permanent relocation really meant. But why was all this happening? Marcus continued searching through the documents until he found a letter written in David Henderson's handwriting. It was addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission and detailed financial irregularities at Pacific Financial Group during the time of Blackstone Industries' acquisition. According to the letter, David had discovered that Blackstone had used insider information and illegal financial manipulation to acquire Pacific Financial for far less than its actual value. The letter contained specific dates, transaction records, and evidence that could potentially land Blackstone in prison for decades and cost him billions in fines and lawsuits. The letter was dated 6 months ago but had never been sent. Somehow Blackstone had learned about its existence and had been monitoring the Henderson family ever since, waiting for the right moment to eliminate the threat permanently. Marcus photographed everything he could, his heart pounding with every sound in the building. Just as he was closing the safe, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was approaching Blackstone's office. Marcus quickly turned off the lights and hid behind the massive desk. Through the glass door, he could see the silhouette of a security guard making his rounds. The guard tried the door handle, found it locked, and continued down the hallway. After waiting several minutes, Marcus carefully made his way out of the office and continued his cleaning duties, though his mind was racing with everything he had discovered. The Henderson family was going to be murdered in less than 24 hours, and the only person who knew about it was a janitor who wasn't supposed to be there. Marcus tried calling the police from a payphone during his break, but his fears were confirmed. When he mentioned Blackstone's name, the desk sergeant's tone immediately became dismissive. "Sir, you're talking about Richard Blackstone, one of the most respected businessmen in the country. Are you sure you weren't just watching too much television?" These conspiracy theories can seem very real sometimes. Marcus realized that Blackstone's wealth and influence protected him from casual accusations. The billionaire had probably made generous donations to police departments and had connections throughout the justice system. No one would believe a janitor's word against his, but Marcus had photographed the evidence. The problem was that he had obtained it illegally by breaking into Blackstone's safe. Any lawyer would argue that the evidence was inadmissible in court, and Marcus could face serious criminal charges for theft and breaking and entering. As his shift ended and dawn approached, Marcus made a difficult decision. He couldn't rely on official channels to save the Henderson family. He would have to take matters into his own hands and find a way to warn them directly. The challenge was that simply calling them and claiming their lives were in danger would likely result in them hanging up on him or calling the police about a crazy person making threats. Marcus needed a way to approach them that would make them listen to his warning. On his way home, Marcus stopped at an internet cafe and created an anonymous email account. He carefully crafted a message to David Henderson, attaching some of the less incriminating photos from Blackstone's safe as proof that someone was watching his family. The email read, "Mr. Henderson, you don't know me, but your family is in immediate danger. The letter you wrote about Blackstone Industries 6 months ago has put your lives at risk. Please take your family somewhere safe today and contact the FBI, not local police. Trust no one else with this information." Marcus sent the email and then called the Henderson home from a payphone. When David answered, Marcus disguised his voice and said, "Check your email immediately. Your family's lives depend on it. Leave your house today and don't tell anyone where you're going." He hung up before David could respond. It wasn't much, but it was the best Marcus could do with the time he had. Now he needed to figure out his next move. Marcus realized that saving the Henderson family was only the beginning. Blackstone's criminal empire was much larger than one threatened family. The documents in the safe had contained references to other problems that had been resolved over the years. Marcus suspected that the Henderson family might not be Blackstone's first victims. As he sat in his small apartment, looking at Elena's photograph, Marcus understood that his life was about to change dramatically. He had stumbled onto something much bigger than a single crime. He was looking at years of corruption, murder, and conspiracy at the highest levels of corporate power. The question now was whether a simple janitor from El Salvador had what it would take to bring down one of the most powerful men in America. David Henderson stared at his computer screen in disbelief. The email from the unknown sender contained photographs that made his blood run cold. Someone had been watching his family for months, documenting their every move. The photos showed Emma and Sophie playing at their school playground, Sarah leaving the grocery store, and even images of their house taken from different angles at various times of day. His hands shook as he read the message again. The mention of his letter about Blackstone Industries made his stomach drop. He had written that letter 6 months ago after discovering the financial fraud during the acquisition of Pacific Financial Group, but he had never sent it. The evidence was too dangerous, and he had been afraid of what might happen to his family if he came forward. David had kept the letter hidden in his home office, telling no one about it, not even Sarah. How could anyone else know about it unless they had been inside his house? When the phone rang immediately after he finished reading the email, David's heart nearly stopped. The disguised voice on the other end confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't a prank or a scam. Someone was genuinely trying to warn him about a threat to his family. After hanging up, David rushed to his home office and found the letter exactly where he had left it, hidden in a folder behind his filing cabinet. But something was wrong. The pages were in a slightly different order than he remembered, and there was a small coffee stain that hadn't been there before. Someone had been in his house. Someone had photographed the letter and reported back to Blackstone. David ran upstairs to find Sarah helping the twins get ready for school. His wife looked up with concern when she saw his pale face and panicked expression. "David, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "We need to leave," David said, trying to keep his voice calm so he wouldn't frighten the children. "Right now. Pack some clothes for a few days. We're going to visit your sister in Arizona." Sarah stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about? I can't just leave work, and the girls have school. What's going on?" David pulled Sarah aside and showed her the email and photographs on his phone. As she looked through the images, her face went white. The reality of their situation began to sink in. Their family was being stalked by people with enough resources to conduct professional surveillance. "This is about Blackstone Industries, isn't it?" Sarah whispered. "The company you used to work for." David nodded. "I discovered something I shouldn't have. I thought I was protecting you by keeping quiet. But now they know I have evidence that could destroy them." Within an hour, the Henderson family was in their car driving toward the interstate. David had withdrawn cash from multiple ATMs, turned off their cell phones, and told no one where they were going. He understood that their old life was over. They could never go back to their house on Maple Street or their quiet existence in Riverside. Meanwhile, Marcus Rivera was watching the news at work, hoping to see a report about the Henderson family being safely relocated or about Blackstone being arrested. Instead, he saw something that made his heart sink. The morning news reported that 4 members of the Henderson family had died in a tragic gas explosion at their home on Maple Street. Marcus knew immediately that it was a lie. The Hendersons had escaped, but Blackstone needed the world to believe they were dead. The explosion was probably meant to cover up evidence and make it impossible for anyone to investigate further, but Marcus had a problem. If Blackstone believed the Henderson family was dead, why was Marcus still in danger? The answer came to him with chilling clarity. Blackstone's people must have realized that someone had accessed the safe in his office. They would be reviewing security footage, checking employee records, and systematically investigating anyone who had access to the building that night. As the only person working alone on the 60th floor, Marcus would be their prime suspect. That evening, Marcus noticed subtle changes in his work environment. Security guards seemed to be paying more attention to him, and he caught them whispering and pointing in his direction. His supervisor, normally friendly and relaxed, was formal and distant. Marcus realized he was being watched just as carefully as the Henderson family had been. His every move was being documented and analyzed. Blackstone's people were probably planning how to eliminate him, just like they had tried to eliminate the Hendersons. The difference was that Marcus had advantages the Henderson family didn't. He understood the building's layout better than anyone. He knew which security cameras had blind spots, which doors had faulty locks, and which areas of the building were rarely monitored. Most importantly, he was already inside Blackstone's stronghold, where he could continue gathering evidence. Instead of running like the Hendersons had been forced to do, Marcus decided to go deeper into enemy territory. Over the next few nights, Marcus used his access to explore areas of Blackstone Tower he had never seen before. In the basement levels behind areas marked as storage rooms, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. One room contained filing cabinets full of documents about other families and individuals who had posed threats to Blackstone Industries over the years. Each file followed the same pattern: surveillance photos, personal information, daily routines, and finally a newspaper clipping reporting their deaths in accidents, suicides, or unexplained disappearances. Marcus counted at least 30 files spanning 15 years. Blackstone had been systematically eliminating anyone who threatened his empire, making each death look natural or accidental. The Henderson family would have been just the latest victims in a long line of murders disguised as tragedies. In another room, Marcus found something even more disturbing: computers and monitoring equipment that were being used to track current targets. Multiple families and individuals were under active surveillance, their lives being documented in preparation for final resolution. Among the current targets, Marcus was horrified to see his own photograph and personal information. His file was labeled Maintenance Worker, Level 3 Threat, Immediate Action Required, Level 3. Threat meant they considered him dangerous enough to require elimination, but not important enough to be careful about it. Marcus realized that his accident was probably planned for very soon, possibly even that same night. As he photographed the evidence with his phone, Marcus heard footsteps approaching from multiple directions. His heart pounded as he realized he had walked into a trap. The security guards had been watching him all along, waiting for him to lead them to whatever evidence he had already collected. Marcus quickly turned off his phone and slipped it into a hiding place he had prepared. A small space behind a water pipe where it wouldn't be found even during a thorough search. If something happened to him, at least the evidence might eventually be discovered by someone who could use it. The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus could hear voices coordinating their approach, making sure he had no way to escape. These weren't regular security guards. They moved with military precision and spoke in the same code words he had heard Blackstone use. As the men closed in on his location, Marcus thought about Elena and the promise he had made to her about helping others. He had managed to save the Henderson family and gather evidence of Blackstone's crimes, but now it looked like he wouldn't survive to see justice done. The door to the room burst open, and Marcus found himself face to face with 3 armed men in tactical gear. They didn't look like security guards or police officers. They looked like the kind of people who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. "Marcus Rivera," said the leader, a cold-eyed man with a Russian accent. "You have caused Mr. Blackstone considerable inconvenience. That ends tonight." Marcus raised his hands slowly, his mind racing for any possible escape. The 3 armed men had positioned themselves to block all exits, but Marcus had spent 3 years learning every inch of this building. He knew something they didn't. The room they were in had a ventilation grate that connected to the building's main air system. "You made a mistake coming here alone," Marcus said, trying to buy time while slowly moving toward the back wall. The Russian laughed coldly. "The only mistake was letting a janitor live this long after discovering our operations." "What operations?" Marcus asked, continuing to inch backward. "Murder? Fraud? Or are you talking about something bigger?" The man's expression changed slightly. "You know nothing about what you've stumbled into. Blackstone Industries is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. We handle problems for many powerful people across many countries." Marcus realized he had uncovered something far more massive than corporate fraud. This was an international conspiracy that used legitimate businesses like Blackstone Industries as cover for assassination and organized crime on a global scale. "The Henderson family," Marcus said. "You failed to kill them." "Temporary setback," the Russian replied. "They cannot hide forever, but you will not live to see tomorrow." As the man raised his weapon, Marcus dove toward the wall and kicked out the ventilation grate he had loosened during previous nights. The opening was barely large enough for a person, but Marcus had grown up crawling through tight spaces in the slums of San Salvador. Gunshots echoed through the room as Marcus disappeared into the ventilation system. The bullets sparked off metal ducts as he crawled frantically through the darkness, using his intimate knowledge of the building's layout to navigate toward safety. Marcus could hear the men shouting behind him, coordinating their search, They would be checking every possible exit from the building, but Marcus wasn't planning to leave. Instead, he crawled toward the executive floors, where he hoped to find Richard Blackstone himself. Emerging from a grate on the 58th floor, Marcus found himself in a conference room. Through the windows, he could see the first hints of dawn breaking over the city skyline. He had been in the building all night, and his shift was supposed to end soon. Marcus made his way carefully to Blackstone's office, expecting to find it empty. Instead, he discovered Blackstone sitting at his desk, apparently waiting for him. The billionaire looked calm and composed, as if armed men hunting a janitor through his building was just another normal business situation. "Mr. Rivera," Blackstone said without looking up from his computer, "I was wondering when you would make your way up here." Marcus stood in the doorway, unsure whether to run or approach. Blackstone seemed to be alone, but Marcus suspected there were probably more armed men nearby. "You're wondering why I'm here by myself," Blackstone continued, finally looking at Marcus. "The truth is, I wanted to speak with you personally before this situation is resolved." "Resolved?" Marcus asked, stepping into the office but staying near the door. "You've seen the files downstairs. You understand the scope of what we do here. What you don't understand is why it's necessary." Blackstone stood up and walked to the windows overlooking the city. "Do you see all those lights out there, Mr. Rivera? Each one represents thousands of people living their comfortable lives, completely unaware of the chaos that would consume them if certain information became public." "So you murder people to protect chaos?" Marcus asked. "I eliminate specific threats to maintain stability," Blackstone corrected. "The Henderson family, if they had released their information, would have caused the collapse of not just Blackstone Industries, but 17 other companies that employ over 200,000 people. The economic ripple effects would have destroyed millions of lives." Marcus stared at the billionaire in disbelief. "You're trying to justify murder by claiming you're protecting people?" "I'm explaining reality," Blackstone said. "Sometimes a few people must die to prevent much greater suffering. It's a responsibility that few people are strong enough to accept." "What about all the other families in those files? Were they all threats to the economy too?" Blackstone's expression hardened. "Each situation is evaluated individually. Some people discover information that could destabilize governments, crash markets, or reveal operations that protect national security. Others simply know too much about our methods." "And which category do I fall into?" Marcus asked. "You, Mr. Rivera, represent a unique problem. You're not important enough to cause major damage, but you're persistent enough to be genuinely dangerous. Under normal circumstances, you would have had a simple accident days ago." "What changed?" Blackstone smiled coldly. "We discovered something interesting while investigating your background, something that changes your value considerably." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" "Your real name isn't Marcus Rivera," Blackstone said, consulting a file on his desk. "Your birth name is Miguel Santos, and your father was Colonel Eduardo Santos of the El Salvador National Guard." Marcus's world tilted. His father had died when Marcus was young, and his mother had changed their names and fled the country to escape the violence of the Civil War. Marcus had grown up believing his father was just a simple soldier who had died fighting for his country. Colonel Santos was involved in some very sensitive operations during the 1980s. Blackstone continued. Operations that were funded and directed by certain agencies of the United States government. Your father kept detailed records of these activities, including evidence of war crimes committed by American military advisors. "My father is dead," Marcus said weakly. "He died over 30 years ago. But his records survived. Your mother brought them to America when she fled El Salvador with you. She hid them, probably waiting for the right time to use them or pass them on to you." Marcus thought about his mother, who had died 10 years earlier without ever talking about the past. She had always refused to discuss El Salvador or his father, claiming it was too painful to remember. "Those records," Blackstone said, "contain information that could embarrass some very powerful people who are still alive today. People who have become senators, generals, and cabinet members. People who pay us very well to ensure their past. Mistakes remain buried. The pieces suddenly fell into place. This wasn't just about corporate fraud or even organized crime. Marcus had unknowingly inherited evidence of government corruption and war crimes that reached the highest levels of American politics. "Where are my father's records?" Marcus asked. "That's what we need to find out," Blackstone replied. "Your mother was very clever about hiding them. We've searched every property she ever owned, every bank account, every storage facility. The records have never been found. Maybe they were destroyed years ago. Possible, but unlikely. Your mother was too smart to destroy such valuable insurance. She hid them somewhere safe, somewhere you would eventually find them when you were ready." Marcus realized that Blackstone had kept him alive because he needed Marcus to lead him to his father's records. The moment Marcus found them, or the moment Blackstone was convinced they no longer existed, Marcus would be eliminated. "What happens if I help you find them?" Marcus asked. "You and the Henderson family disappear quietly to a country where you can live comfortably under new identities. You never speak of what you've learned, and everyone survives." "And if I refuse?" Blackstone's smile disappeared. "Then you join the long list of people who thought they could fight us and win. Your choice, Mr. Rivera. Help us find your father's legacy, or watch it die with you." Marcus stared at Blackstone, processing the revelation about his father's hidden records. Everything he thought he knew about his family history was a lie, and now his mother's secrets were threatening not only his life, but potentially exposing decades-old war crimes. "I need time to think about this," Marcus said carefully. "Time is something we don't have," Blackstone replied. "My associates are growing impatient with this situation. They want it resolved today, one way or another." Marcus realized that Blackstone was under pressure from people even more powerful than himself. The billionaire wasn't the mastermind of this conspiracy. He was just another employee in a vast network of corruption that stretched from corporate boardrooms to government offices. "If my mother hid something, I honestly don't know where it would be," Marcus said. "She never talked about El Salvador or my father. I don't even have any of her personal belongings anymore." "Think harder," Blackstone said, his patience wearing thin. "Your mother lived in the same apartment for 15 years before she died. She worked at the same factory, shopped at the same stores, attended the same church. People don't hide important documents randomly. They put them somewhere meaningful, somewhere safe." Marcus thought about his mother, Maria Santos, who had worked double shifts at a textile factory to support them after they arrived in America. She had been a deeply religious woman who found comfort in routine and tradition. If she had hidden something important, where would she have put it? Suddenly, Marcus remembered something. After his mother's funeral, he had donated most of her belongings to charity, but there were a few items he had kept: her rosary, her Bible, and a small, wooden box that contained old photographs and documents related to their immigration to America. "There's a box," Marcus said slowly, "with some of her old papers. I haven't looked through it in years." Blackstone's eyes lit up with interest. "Where is this box?" "In my apartment. But I want guarantees before I show you anything. I want proof that the Henderson family is safe, and I want your word that they'll be left alone permanently." "You're hardly in a position to make demands," Blackstone said, but his tone suggested he was willing to negotiate. "I'm in the only position that matters," Marcus replied, finding courage he didn't know he possessed. "I'm the only person who knows where those records might be. If something happens to me, you'll never find them." Blackstone considered this for a moment, then picked up his phone and made a call. He spoke in code words, but Marcus could tell he was arranging for proof that the Henderson family was alive and safe. 20 minutes later, Blackstone's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then handed the phone to Marcus. "Uncle Marcus?" came a small voice on the other end. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. It was Emma Henderson, one of the twins. But why was she calling him Uncle Marcus? "Emma, are you okay? Where are you?" "We're safe," the little girl said. "Daddy says to tell you. Thank you for the warning. He also says to tell you that Mommy found something in Grandma Maria's things." Marcus was confused. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." David Henderson's voice came on the line. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. Your mother and my wife's grandmother were the same person. Sarah's grandmother was Maria Santos, who took care of Sarah's mother after her parents died in El Salvador. Maria brought Sarah's mother to America and helped raise her." The world seemed to spin around Marcus. Sarah Henderson was his cousin, which meant the Henderson family wasn't random targets. They were connected to his father's legacy. Blackstone hadn't just been trying to eliminate a threat to his business. He had been systematically hunting down everyone connected to Colonel Eduardo Santos and his hidden records. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked. "Sarah figured it out yesterday, when she was looking through old family photos," David replied. "She recognized you from pictures her grandmother had shown her years ago. Maria always talked about her son Miguel, who worked as a janitor, but we never made the connection until now." Marcus realized that his mother had been protecting the Henderson family by keeping their relationship secret. She had known that her son's legacy put everyone connected to their family in danger. "David," Marcus said urgently, "does Sarah have any of Maria's belongings?" "Yes, quite a few things, including a trunk that her grandmother made her promise never to open unless something happened to the family. Sarah opened it yesterday." Marcus felt Blackstone's intense stare as he continued the conversation. What was in the trunk? Documents, photographs, and what looks like military records from El Salvador. There are also letters written in Spanish that mention American names and dates from the 1980s. Sarah thinks this might be what people have been looking for. Marcus closed his eyes, understanding now that his mother had split his father's records between multiple family members as insurance. She had kept some documents herself while giving others to Sarah's grandmother, ensuring that no single person could be eliminated to destroy all the evidence. "Is the trunk safe?" Marcus asked. "We have it with us. What should we do?" Marcus looked at Blackstone, who was listening to every word with growing interest. "Stay where you are. Don't trust anyone except each other. I'll figure out what to do next." Marcus handed the phone back to Blackstone, who immediately began making calls to his associates. The billionaire was excited about the discovery, but Marcus could see wheels turning in his head. Once Blackstone had both parts of the records, there would be no reason to keep Marcus or the Henderson family alive. "This changes things significantly," Blackstone said after finishing his calls. "We now know there are 2 sets of documents. We'll need to collect both simultaneously to ensure nothing is missed." "What's your plan?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "You're going to contact your cousin and arrange a meeting. We'll exchange the documents for everyone's safety, and then this unfortunate situation can be resolved permanently." Marcus knew that resolved permanently meant they would all be killed once Blackstone had what he needed. But he also realized that this might be his only chance to turn the tables on the conspiracy that had destroyed so many lives. "I'll need to get the box from my apartment first," Marcus said. "Then we can arrange to meet with the Henderson family." Blackstone nodded. "Of course, but you understand that you'll be accompanied by my associates, for everyone's protection." Marcus knew he would be under armed guard from now until the moment Blackstone decided he was no longer useful. But during his years as a janitor, Marcus had learned that people in power often underestimated those they considered beneath them. Blackstone saw him as a simple immigrant worker who could be controlled through threats and intimidation. What Blackstone didn't realize was that Marcus had grown up during a civil war, had served in the military, and had survived poverty and discrimination that would have broken weaker men. Most importantly, Marcus now understood that he wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was fighting to protect his newly discovered family and to expose a conspiracy that had been destroying lives for decades. An hour later, Marcus found himself in his small apartment accompanied by 2 of Blackstone's men. They watched as he retrieved his mother's wooden box from the top shelf of his bedroom closet. The box was heavier than he remembered, and his hands shook as he set it on his kitchen table. Inside, beneath old immigration documents and family photographs, Marcus found a manila envelope sealed with tape and marked with his mother's handwriting, "For Miguel, when you are ready to know the truth about your father." One of Blackstone's men photographed everything as Marcus carefully opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of military reports, correspondence between American military advisors and Salvadoran officers, and detailed accounts of operations that had resulted in the deaths of hundreds of civilians. The documents showed that his father, Colonel Eduardo Santos, had been ordered to participate in massacres and torture operations under the direction of American military advisors. But instead of simply following orders, Colonel Santos had documented everything, creating an insurance policy that he hoped would protect his family if he ever needed to expose the truth. Among the papers was a letter addressed to Marcus, written in his father's handwriting shortly before his death. The letter explained that Eduardo Santos had tried to resist the illegal orders, but had been threatened with the deaths of his wife and son. He had participated in the operations to protect his family, but he had also gathered evidence that could bring down the American officials who had orchestrated the crimes. "Your mother is taking you to America," the letter read. "She has copies of everything, and she will hide them until you are old enough to decide what to do with this burden. If you choose to seek justice, these documents will help you. If you choose to forget the past and build a new life, that is also acceptable. The choice is yours, my son." Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he read his father's words. Eduardo Santos had been caught between impossible choices, trying to protect his family while preserving evidence of crimes he had been forced to commit. The weight of that moral burden had probably contributed to his death. But now Marcus understood why his mother had never talked about the past. She had been carrying the same burden, protecting documents that could destroy powerful people while try. "Marcus," David's voice came through the phone, but something was different about his tone. "We need to meet at the location your mother specified. Sarah found the instructions in her grandmother's things." Marcus was confused. His mother had never specified a meeting location, and Sarah's grandmother had died years before any of this started. But David's emphasis on certain words made Marcus realize that his cousin was trying to tell him something without alerting Blackstone's men. "What location?" Marcus asked carefully. "The address your mother wrote down. The one that matches the key. Sarah says her grandmother always told her that if the family was ever in serious trouble, they should go to the place where Maria used to pray." Marcus suddenly understood. The key in his palm and the address his mother had written were connected. She had hidden something at a location that only family members would understand. His mother had been deeply religious, attending the same church for 15 years. The key probably opened something at St. Maria's Catholic Church. "I understand," Marcus said. "When do you want to meet?" "1 hour. And Marcus, bring everything. Sarah says it's time to put all the pieces together." After Marcus hung up, one of Blackstone's men immediately called his boss to report the conversation. Marcus could hear Blackstone's excited voice through the phone, giving orders to have the church surrounded and monitored. As they drove toward St. Maria's, Marcus thought about his mother's final gift to him. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, knowing that eventually her son would need to confront his father's legacy. Every Sunday service, every prayer, every moment of devotion had been building toward this confrontation with the past. St. Maria's Catholic Church was a small, modest building in a working-class neighborhood where many Central American immigrants had built their lives. Marcus had attended services there with his mother until her death, but he had stopped going afterward, unable to find comfort in faith after losing the most important person in his world. As they approached the church, Marcus could see unmarked cars positioned around the building. Blackstone had deployed a small army to ensure that no one escaped with the documents. But Marcus suspected that his mother had anticipated this possibility too. Inside the church, Marcus found David and Sarah Henderson waiting in a pew near the altar. The twins were not with them, which Marcus hoped meant they were somewhere safe. Sarah looked remarkably like his mother had at that age, and Marcus could see the family resemblance that should have been obvious years earlier. "Miguel," Sarah said, using his birth name. "Grandmother Maria always talked about you. She was so proud of the man you became." "She never told me we were related," Marcus replied. "She was protecting all of us," David explained. "She knew that if Blackstone's people discovered the family connections, they would target everyone at once instead of hunting us separately." Marcus showed them his father's documents while Sarah revealed the contents of her grandmother's trunk. The two sets of papers told a complete story of American military involvement in Central American war crimes, including specific names, dates, and evidence that could destroy dozens of political and military careers. But as they compared the documents, Marcus realized something was missing. The most damaging evidence, the photographs and recorded confessions that his father had mentioned in his letter, weren't in either collection. "There has to be more," Marcus said, pulling out the key his mother had hidden. "She left this for me to find." Sarah's eyes widened when she saw the key. "Grandmother showed me where that goes," she whispered, "but she made me promise never to tell anyone unless the family was facing extinction." Sarah led them to a small room behind the altar, where the church kept religious artifacts and supplies. In the corner was an old wooden chest that had been donated years earlier by Maria Santos. The key fit perfectly into the lock. Inside the chest, wrapped in plastic and carefully preserved, were the original documents that Colonel Eduardo Santos had died protecting. Photographs of mass graves, recorded confessions from American military advisors, and detailed plans for operations that had violated every international law governing military conduct. But the most shocking discovery was a list of names. American. Politicians, military officers, and business leaders who had profited from the violence in Central America. Many of the names were people who still held positions of power in the current government. "This is why they've been so desperate to find us," David said, looking through the photographs. "These documents don't just expose past crimes. They show ongoing corruption that reaches the highest levels of government." Marcus understood. Now that Blackstone Industries was just one tentacle of a massive criminal organization that had been operating for decades with government protection, the people on his father's list had used their positions to enrich themselves through violence and oppression, and they had built a network of assassins and enforcers to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose them. Outside the church, Marcus could hear vehicles arriving. Blackstone had grown tired of waiting and was preparing to take the documents by force. "We need to get this evidence to someone who can act on it," Marcus said. "But who can we trust?" Sarah pulled out a cell phone and showed them a video she had recorded earlier. "While you were getting your mother's documents, I contacted 3 different news organizations and the FBI. I sent copies of everything we found to reporters and federal agents who specialize in government corruption. They'll try to kill us all before any of this can be made public," David warned. "That's why we're not leaving," Marcus replied, surprising them both. "My mother spent 15 years coming to this church, building relationships with this community. These people have been ignored and exploited their entire lives, but they know how to protect each other." As if on cue, the church doors opened and dozens of parishioners began filing in. Word had spread through the immigrant community that the Santos family needed help, and people were arriving to show their support. Many of them carried cell phones and cameras, ready to document whatever happened next. Father Martinez, the elderly priest who had known Marcus's mother, approached their group. "Maria always said this day would come," he told Marcus. "She prepared us for it." Marcus realized that his mother had built more than just a hiding place for documents. She had created a network of witnesses and supporters who would ensure that the truth couldn't be buried along with her family. When Blackstone's men burst into the church, they found themselves facing not just Marcus and the Henderson family, but an entire community of people who had experienced government violence in their home countries and recognized it when they saw it again. The live streams and video recordings began immediately. Blackstone's men found themselves being filmed from dozens of angles as they threatened families inside a church. Within minutes, the footage was spreading across social media and being picked up by news organizations around the world. Marcus stepped forward to address Blackstone directly as the billionaire entered the church. "It's over," Marcus said, holding up copies of his father's evidence. "The whole world is watching now. You can kill us, but you can't kill the truth anymore." Blackstone looked around at the cameras and witnesses, realizing that his carefully orchestrated conspiracy had been turned into a very public confrontation. Any violence now would only confirm the accusations being made against him. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," Blackstone said quietly. "The people on that list have the power to destroy anyone who threatens them. You think you're exposing corruption, but you're really just signing death warrants for everyone in this room. Maybe, Marcus replied. But my father died believing that some truths are worth dying for. My mother spent her entire life protecting those truths, and now it's my turn to decide whether justice matters more than safety. Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him. His cousin Sarah, her husband David, Father Martinez, and dozens of community members who had risked their own safety to stand with him. These were people who had lost everything to violence and corruption, yet they had found the courage to demand something better. The difference between you and us, Marcus told Blackstone, is that we're not afraid to die for what's right. But you're terrified to live with what's wrong. As federal agents arrived and began placing Blackstone and his associates under arrest, Marcus finally understood his mother's greatest lesson. She had taught him that ordinary people, when they stand together for truth, are more powerful than any conspiracy. The janitor's curiosity had exposed a billionaire's darkest secrets, but it was a community's courage that would ensure justice was finally served. The investigation that followed would span years and involve multiple countries, but it began in a small church where a janitor honored his father's legacy and his mother's sacrifice by choosing to fight for the truth, no matter the cost.